open thanking Sharon for opening the SDC base medrash for us. As I always say, she's, it's like the prophet Samuel lived in the Mishkan to make sure that it would always be ready when the pilgrims would show up. So Sharon is nice enough to live in our base medrash and to keep it so beautiful between shiurim.
Yay, Sharon.
Yay, Sharon. I would also like to thank, she's worth it. I would also like to thank Rena for her logistical help as always, not only in helping me produce the source sheets, but also the recording so that those who couldn't be with us or those who fell asleep the first time have a chance to listen to the shir, because you never know.
I can't fall asleep because your delivery is...
Well, in between the jokes you fall asleep.
Yeah.
Finally, I have a sad note tinged with a happy note. And that is, this shir marks the first time that we are gathering without two of our beloved regulars. And I'm speaking of Laurie Oppenheimer, Alea Shalom, and my dear Stan Yemens. These are two people who over decades showed their great love of Torah and their personal capacities for graciousness and for gratitude. And please God, the shir will continue to attract new people. People such as them are irreplaceable. And I dare say I will never give a shir without imagining them present among us. I said that this was tinged with some great happiness because Stanley's son Leslie is here with us, and a more devoted son the Almighty has not created. And the fact that, I was downstairs, I'm coming in from the Independence Avenue side, I'm walking in, and I see Leslie coming to the White House. I said, does he know anybody in the White House? and he lives in New Rochelle. He's very beloved there, or Scarsdale. He lives there. What's he doing here in the White House? I'm walking in, he says, good, I'm not late. And I, slow as I am, so for what? That's the way it goes. Okay. As we approach the Yemei Hadin, last night we said Slichos for the first time, if we're Ashkenazim. As we approach this season, which has quite enough strands of anxiety in its fabric, the question of where do we begin is always just on my mind. And one exercise which may be helpful as we move toward the days of judgment is to ask two very simple questions. Where are we, and where is God? In other words, how do we think about ourselves as we stand before Him? And further, how do we think about Him? How do we imagine? Mark Rubin, so nice to see you. Come on in. How do we imagine the face of the judge, as it were? And the prism through which I thought we might examine these two questions is a fascinating Gemara. And it's a Gemara which explains not what happens on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but a Gemara which explains what doesn't happen. It's a Gemara in Ærchīn, as you have on your sheets. I'll read it with you in a moment. The Gemara in Ærchīn is essentially raising the question of what are the criteria that trigger the recitation of Hallel. When is the right time to say Hallel? Now it's clear that as this Gemara was formulated, the observances that we have today were pretty much already set. In other words, if you ask a Jew in the street, do you say Hallel on this day? Do you say Hallel on that day? The Jew would know what the answer was. However, the rabbis were interested in the question of, is there some kind of an objective criteria? Why don't we say Hallel on Shabbos? It's a very holy day. Why do we say on Hanukkah and not on Purim? All these kinds of questions. The problem of Rosh Chodesh. So the Gemara in Ærchīn goes about a process of identifying what kind of a day in the calendar, what characteristics. So if you made a spreadsheet, right, how many columns would you have to check until you find the criteria for Hallel? So the Gemara opens this up and really posits Shabbos against Rosh Chodesh. We know that in Rosh Chodesh, even though we say Hallel, it's a deficient Hallel and it doesn't have the same standing, it's only a custom, it's not one of the absolute occasions. So the Gemara is trying to sort of do a chemical analysis. How come Shabbos doesn't get it? How come Rosh Chodesh doesn't get it? So the Gemara comes with this conclusion. Well, Rosh Chodesh doesn't get it because it is not a day. It's not a day when melacha is forbidden, when one is forbidden to work. All right. Shabbos doesn't get it because it's not termed a moed. It is not, so to speak, one of a festive day. It's a day where there's oneg, pleasure, but it doesn't have the same festive character as the Yom Tovim. And it goes, well, what about the difference? So we now know Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh each have a deficiency. But then we compare two days which seem to be almost mirror images of one another in certain ways. You have Sukkot and you have Pesach. And in terms of when you really recite Hallel, Sukkot you absolutely recite Hallel every day. Pesach, full Hallel is only recited on the first day. 2 days if you live in the diaspora. So what happened to the rest of the days of Pesach? So the Gemara says the rest of the days of Pesach are deficient in that they do not have individual, unique sacrificial programs. Their sacrifices are just like the first day. And so when you said Hallel on the first day, you've finished with Pesach. Now, of course, everyone is thinking in the back of their mind, there's that whole other tradition, which we will touch in another context, that the last days of Pesach relate to the drowning of the Egyptians, the splitting of the Red Sea, and you didn't want to have Hallel recited on Chol HaMoed and then embarrass the last day, so we left it out of all of Chol HaMoed. That's a parallel line of tradition. The Gemara in Ærchīn is only very clinical. The Gemara in Ærchīn is only interested in sacrifice. So if the remaining 6 days of Pesach don't get their own korban, their own sacrifice, then they don't get Hallel either. So now we've got this criteria, the three elements that they must be called either a chag or a moed. They must be have isur melacha, a prohibition against productive work, and they must have a unique sacrificial program. So then the Gemara comes to its kind of denouement. Hanukkah and Purim are a separate discussion. That has to do with miracles. We're going to leave that out. But then the Gemara asks the glaring question. I don't know. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur especially Rosh Hashanah, seem to meet these criteria. Do you say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah? I should hope not. It's all we need in the shul. Everyone is moving along, and there, at the top of her lungs in the ladies section, is Bola Hachman saying a personal Hallel. Nobody else. She's not paying attention to anybody else. And they stop me. She sounds good. Doctor, maybe we should consider this. And then it's not in the machzor, and we know that if something is not in the machzor, it doesn't matter what it is. Right? You don't yell fire to the fire department if it's not in the machzor. The whole shul could be burning up in flames. Somebody will say, fire! Someone will say, what page is that? You can't possibly do it. Anyway, that's true about it. But So what happened to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? And here the Gemara turns to an entirely different style of answering. And that's why I put it in the bold print. Here we have one of those dialogues which occurs at different points in rabbinic literature. And this is where we have a challenge posed by the angels. The angels say to God, why are you doing things the way you're doing it? So for instance, the angels ask God, why are you giving the Torah to man? That was one of their famous questions in the Gemara and Shabbos. Here the Malachei Asharei say to God, and this is going to be the story, so to speak, that explains why we don't say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So the Omar Rabiyat Bahu, Amru Malachei Asharei Slifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You'll see it's in the first paragraph here in bold print. The angels said to God, Ribbon Shalom, Mipnei ma ein Yisrael omrim shira lefanecha Rosh Hashanah v'yom HaKippur. Why are the Jews not offering you Hallel on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Now, of course, we know the Malachei Asharis, these angels, they never mean well for us. Right? Implicit in this is a challenge. The challenge is it meets all of the criteria, right, that we've just assigned. It meets criteria. The Jews must be slacking off. Right? The davening's too long. They decide where they're going to cut. They cut Hallel. As if to say they are so preoccupied with themselves that they have become neglectful of the praise that they owe to God. They should be singing. What the heck's going on with those people? So, of course, the Almighty answers. This is how these dialogues work. It's fascinating. It's a subgenre. The Almighty answers them, Omar Lahem. And these answers usually reflect their lack of sensitivity. Logic they have, but feeling they don't. And he says to them, Efshar melech yoshev al kisei hadin. Is it possible that the king is sitting on the throne of judgment, v'sifrei chayim, v'sifrei mesim, pesuchim lefonov, and the books of those who are living and those who are dead? Multiple books, I would just note. For some people, this is going to be important. Open before him, the Israel omrim shira lefanai. Would that be an appropriate occasion for Israel to be singing the songs of Hallel? Yes, Jim.
Seems to me that if you want to get something from someone, it's very appropriate to praise it, because you're more likely to get it, number one. Number two, as we know, David says, although you don't, I will not be silent, even when things are going badly for him, I'm going to praise God. So
I don't think that Shira is the same as Shevach. In other words, acknowledging the qualities of God, there's plenty of that in the prayer book. Even in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, right? We make such a big deal out of Avos, which is Shevach. Hallel is a different story. Hallel is a reactive prayer. It's a reaction of overwhelming joy, a kind of a cup running over expression. It reflects our state and acknowledges that that state is a gift from God. So what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying is, apparently, and this Gemara is much less clear than you would think, as you will note in the structure of the Shir coming. The Gemara seems to be saying that that would be a faux pas, that is not the correct way to respond to the Yemei Hadin. And the question is, why not? And here we're going to today explore 4 different approaches. 2 of those approaches have to do with the question of who am I? In other words, finding the correct pose, the correct mindset for the days of judgment. And the other 2 are based on what is the mood what is the mood of the Almighty on these occasions, and so our mood is reactive to that. So let's take these four approaches, and you'll see that each one offers a reflective opportunity, which has, I think, wonderful value. It's important to note, somebody make sure Alicia has a comfy spot. It's important to note that one of the main mechanisms of rabbinic thought is what you might call the chemical reaction. What do I mean? I mean that when we have a rabbinic text, which is perhaps a little bit ambiguous, various commentaries, some of them early, most commonly among the Achronim in the later period, will come and view that text through the prism of another one. So if you've ever been to Dr. Banyuk, you'll know that you sit in a chair and you look at those silly letters, right, that look like somebody's Polish maiden name, right? You look at those letters, and he takes the little lenses, and he goes, "Does this look better? Is this better? Is this better? Is this better?" Right? And I always say, "You're the one with the fuzzy letters. What's bothering me?" Well, what we do when we examine Chazal is we use other pieces of rabbinic teaching, like those lenses. We flip them in and say, when you look at it through this particular lens, through this mindset, you will see something different. You actually will see it in a slightly different interpretive context. And that's exactly what's going to happen. The first one is perhaps an exception to that rule. The first one is the Rambam. And the Rambam is fascinating because in the Rambam we have his reformulation of the Gemara's conclusion, right? So one of the ways that we know what something means is when someone translates it or says it in a different way. So for example, if I'm counseling someone and they'll express a feeling, I will say to them, "Am I hearing you right? Is this what I'm hearing?" And I say it in different words, right? That's called, right? What's the technical term for that, Bella?
Reflective, it's not.
Reflecting, yeah. So,
Carl Rogers.
what?
Carl Rogers.
Yeah. Well, that's who came up with it. I didn't ask Bella, could ask. I could ask you also. So, that's to make sure. So, when in the Rambam, we have the privilege, occasionally, of knowing exactly which passage in the Gemara the Rambam is referring to, but we have the Rambam's reformulation. So that the reformulation is his interpretation. So now on this one, we turn to the Rambam in Hilchos Chanukah, which is a very interesting phenomenon that I'm sure you've been thinking a lot about. The Rambam, when the Rambam wants to treat the issue of Hallel, he does not treat it in any of the festivals, right? Certainly not Rosh Chodesh. He treats it in Hilchos Chanukah. And the Rav Zatzal used to say, because Chanukah is unique, that Chanukah is the Yom Tov where the entire theme of the Yom Tov is Hallel. It is, so to speak, I hate to use a negative medical analogy, but, you know, lo aleinu v'lo aleichem, when a person is diagnosed with a metastatic cancer situation, they want to know what is the point of origin. In other words, where did the cancer begin? Because its origin often will tell us about the nature of the disease so that we can treat it in all of its iterations. So the way the Rambam seems to view Hallel, Hallel is the source. It is the Hallel, Chanukah is the Hallel par excellence, and other Hallels. So when he treats it conceptually, it is in Hilchos Chanukah. But there he talks about Hallel on all the other days. So what does he say vis-a-vis this Gemara? What happened to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Avo Rosh Hashanah v'yom הכיפורים, ein bohem Hallel. There is no Hallel. Lefi shehem yemei teshuva v'yira v'fachad. Because they are primarily days of repentance, and this repentance is expressed through fear and I would say dread. This answers the question, what is supposed to be our mood, our posture during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Now this is very interesting because here there is really a kind of a dialectical tension. Because Rosh Hashanah is called Moed, so that according to many, the obligation of Simchas Yom Tov does exist at some stratum, even on Rosh Hashanah. And indeed, there's a whole tradition, line in tradition, mentioned in the Torah, which talks about the need to do all sorts of things which reflect our optimism. You know, to be beautifully coiffed, and to have new clothing, and to be clean. All of these things are that side of Rosh Hashanah, the optimistic side, which means that there is a strand, so to speak, of some kind of sacred joy. However, the Rambam says what is supposed to be the dominant sensibility is this sense of fear, of fragility, the sense that we are vulnerable. And we are vulnerable, we are twice vulnerable. We are vulnerable first because we are a fragile species. The number of different things that can go wrong in the human body defies the imagination. I mean, every single organ has its list of possible diseases and syndromes. Right? My poor son Shmuel, spending the entire year as an eved, trying to commit these possibilities to memory, right, in medical school. So we are physically exceptionally vulnerable. Secondly, we are also spiritually vulnerable. Because when we come before the Almighty and we open our books, so to speak, most of us facing this audit, not only do we owe back taxes, we can't even get our papers together. Right? Because the real challenge of tshuva, it is so hard to organize our thinking about ourselves. Right? It's not just that we're holding on to sins. We're holding on to chaos. We're holding on to lives that we don't even know how to defend because we act thoughtlessly, we act impetuously, we act inconsistently. And we come, you know, like those people who come to the accountant with a duffel bag slung over their shoulder and just dump out all the paper on the floor, and it's chaos. So we are extremely vulnerable, and I think the truth of the matter is that may be understood as the two expressions of yira v'fachad. Yira is the fear of what there is to be found. Pachad is the fact that we don't even know what there is to be found. That the first eyes that critically light upon our year of activity, first one to see it may actually be Ribbono Shel Olam, because we are so confused. And so we're nervous about what we don't know. So the Rambam says that is supposed to be our primary setting, and reciting Hallel would throw us off. Reciting Hallel would distract us. We might get ourselves so happy that we would get out of posture. We'd get out of position. And I shared with you a comment of the Tzlach, which is, of course, the Tzlach is the Pnei Yoshua, where he writes, he's actually discussing the attitudes toward the menus on Rosh Hashanah. Cooks beware. He says, "V'hakavona she'ein zeh kishar mitzvah simanis k'mo netilas lulav Shinot lo kvar yotzo. He says the shofar, he's talking about the blowing of the shofar. He says the shofar is not a mitzvah that you pick up a shofar, you blow, and you're done, right? Somebody says to you, oh, did you hear shofar? I did that already. That's like the story of the young co-ed who approached a professor at a cocktail party and said, I said, what do you do? He says, I am a student of astronomy. She says, I did that last semester. So, shofar is not a mitzvah which you can say, I took care of that this morning, says the tzlach. Aval kan kol hayom yiyeh yom teruah. The Torah tells us we are supposed to have an entire day characterized as yom teruah, the day of the shofar blast. But the shofar blast is itself a term of art which reflects a deeper meaning. Umetargeminon, what does teruah mean? Yevava o geniche gonach o yelulei yom. It is the sound of the spirit in weeping agitation. That is what the sounds of the shofar are. At least the center sounds. Those are the sounds of either crying or sobbing. Right? V'kino hayom al shem davar zeh. And the entire day is called by this attribute. Lomar she'emas hayom yiyeh olecha. The fear is supposed to be our posture throughout the entire experience of Rosh Hashanah, and by implication, in a different way through Yom Kippur. But at least Rosh Hashanah, it is Yom Teruah. It is the day of this sob. And he goes on in this same passage, which I didn't quote to you, he says, and that is why it is not a day to indulge in, the ultimate Yom Tov menu, which is interesting because common tradition, we have extended the apple and honey after Pesach, after the Seder, perhaps the first night, or Rosh Hashanah generally, is one of the richest cooking holidays. Probably gets more space on, the second section of most newspapers where people are sharing their recipes. One newspaper, which will go nameless, used to have their grandmother's recipe for this and this, and just a little bit of bacon really helps it. In any case, the tzlach says that is the posture, and that seems to be the attitude of the Rambam. So the Rambam's answer, this is answer one, all right? There will be a quiz at the end. Answer one is, why is there no Hallel? Because I am not supposed to be in the mood for Hallel. I am in the mood of Yom Teruah. I am in the mood of Yirah v'Fachad throughout the day. And whatever I hold on to as a kind of a personal confidence, it's a very thin pretense of confidence. It's confidence which is clearly only poorly masking the underlying terror that is the experience of standing before God in judgment and praying that He will allow Himself to be shifted from the posture of strict judgment, which would really be the end of all of us, and to assume a compassionate stance in which we at least have a shot. Yes?
So why didn't you say something about the tour? How come that's not a part of it?
The confidence business, because it really is a struggle. And the tour says you have to try to affect that confidence. It's probably based on the Gemara where Abaya says, Simona Milsa, that by having certain symbols, that really is effective. It has some beneficial effect on the judgment. But these two postures, that's why there was a very long debate in halacha about the the appropriateness of fasting on Rosh Hashanah. There was a school of thought. There were Gedolim who actually fasted on Rosh Hashanah. And I have to say that through all of my years, I have always experienced Rosh Hashanah as the most unsettling, terrifying days of the year. Rosh Hashanah, it's different. Rosh Hashanah and Tisha B'Av in the 9 days are times when my core is frozen. Because the knowledge of what the reality of the universe is in those moments. And the Torah is a separate tradition, but I don't think it was ever, let's put it this way, the tradition of fear and trembling maybe shared the stage with the tradition of confidence and joyfulness. But it never did more than share the stage. Sometimes the tradition of fearfulness has vanquished the joy, but the joy has never vanquished.
Why do we blow the shofar during the months of Elul?
It's kind of a warning shot to warm up. Because I really think, and I think Cynthia is a wonderful question, if we had to start Rosh Hashanah ice cold, was to go from 0 to 60 in one moment, if we didn't have sort of a ramp to lead us up to that, I think that the psychological effect could be very dangerous. You can't turn on. It would be lo aleinu v'lo aleichem. If a person experiences, a sudden crisis of health or something else, and it comes on so quickly that from 1 minute to the next, your life falls out from under you. Very, very dangerous. And this is a graduated process. Let's explore another answer.
Question.
Yes, Jude.
Yes, Pachad and Yira, and definitely for Rosh Hashanah, and also, he said for the 9 days of Tishba. Where does Yom Kippur, doesn't Yom Kippur come into that play also, or not?
Well, Yom Kippur is a little bit different. Yom Kippur has its own joyfulness. But Yom Kippur really is the day of forgiveness, as opposed to being, the day of judgment per se. And we take on certain things on Yom Kippur, which are really, we step away from the world. We step away from our lives. And in that purity, in that clarity, the closeness to God is, it's almost as if you could say, on Yom Kippur we visit God in His house. And in return, on Sukkot, He visits us in ours. So Yom Kippur has a special character. In these Gemaras, I think the primary thinking is about Rosh Hashanah, and because it has to do with the same larger judgment process, Yom Kippur comes along. Let's go on to another approach. Dr. Banyuk is ready to switch the lens and look at this Gemara in Ærchīn through another set of eyes. This time through the Yeshua's Yaakov, who was mostly famous for his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, but also has writings on the Parshios of the Chumash, and this concept comes from his writings in Parshas Achremos. And they are based upon another Gemara. Here is the lens through which we're going to look at our passage. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, this is very famous. Mai dichsiv l'karv zel zeh kol halayla bikshu malachei hasharos lomar shira. That when the Red Sea split and the Egyptians were drowned, the angels wanted to sing Hallel before God. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty, responded, Maseh yodai tovim vayam v'atem omrim shira. My creatures are drowning in the sea, and you want to say shira? Why? Because the assumption of that Gemara is that in this destruction, the Almighty Himself is sad. That although He realizes that it's necessary for the Egyptians to be punished, nevertheless His heart is broken when His creatures are given the ultimate punishment. So the Yeshuas Yaakov says, here he enters a Zoharic tradition. Because the Zohar on one hand tells us that indeed there is pleasure when the wicked are punished. And David HaMelech has promised that he will see the wicked being recompensed. So if there is pleasure, then maybe the day when punishment is handed out would be the perfect occasion for Hallel. We'll call it, there's Hallel Mitzrayim and Hallel Hagodol. We'll call this Hallel Gotcha. So the day when the wicked are given their comeuppance, maybe it should be a happy day. Yeshuas Yaakov answers based on the Zohar. He says, wait, you have to read the fine print. The fine print is the only time the Almighty rejoices in the punishment of the wicked, which He shares with the righteous. Once He shares with them, He invites them into the box seats to watch. That is only when, and this is the expression, when the measure of their wickedness is full. In other words, when they have sinned so much that they are beyond the hope of something better. He says, one second. He says, however, for the vast majority, punishment comes to people who have not filled, so to speak, the measure of their sins. Why? And he says here because there is the notion of Rosha ben Rosha. Maseh avim b'yadeim. That if they continue to do what their parents did, then once we've seen the tendency borne out, that they've started down that path, so sometimes they are punished, they are destroyed, even before they personally have filled up their measure. In those, the Yeshuas Yaakov says, the Almighty has no pleasure. Why? Because the Ribono Shel Olam believes in our potential. The Ribono Shel Olam believes that even if we have been wicked, it is always possible that we will turn it around. And for someone to be punished when they still have some potential, even though it is part of sort of the divine statute of the universe, this breaks God's heart. It breaks God's heart because one dimension of the Holy One is like, it's a bit like a parent. A parent holds out for the most optimistic possible destiny for their child, long beyond when all of the objective facts show that a pattern has been established and it is unlikely that it will be broken. A parent says, you know what? I remember you when you were 2. And you were awfully sweet. And I cannot believe that the qualities that I saw upon inception, I can't believe that those have been completely obliterated. I can't believe that they're lost. And so when the Ribono Shel Olam, even though he's following the dictates of the universe as he ordered it, as he organized it, there is sadness on Yom Hadin. Because inevitably someone is being punished for whom maybe a little bit of hope, a little potential still survived. So according to the Yeshua's Yaakov, the second approach to the books of the living and the dead, and he notes that it's plural books. You know, that the books, because there are many different cases. There are the books of the dead who have filled their measure, and the books of those who will be destroyed who have not filled their measure. So he says, when those books are still open, how could Israel sing to God? How could we say Shira? What's the bottom line? Let me see if I can get all this verbiage folded back into your glove compartment. The bottom line is that Rosh Hashanah, insofar as it is a hard day for some, is a day that finds God sad. And to be singing psalms of joy before God when He is sad is to be insensitive to the face of the judge, not to read what this day means. Now it's very interesting. There are different ways in which we interpret this. There are those who say that in resolving the question that was still bothering Bella, the cheerful tour, one of the resolutions is that we should be cheerful, each of us as an individual, but aware that this is not a good day for someone around us, someone in Klal Yisrael is not getting a happy verdict. And so one of the resolutions is that we are supposed to be personally confident, but we are also to be globally sensitive. Now the truth of the matter is this corresponds very well to one of the most extraordinary kindnesses that the Almighty extends to the human species. By and large, we all think that mortality is for everybody else. We all go around in the sense that, oh, you know, you read the obituaries. You go, oh, what a shame. I just look on the R's. But we couldn't live if we were constantly bearing the burden that today could be my day, which of course, logically it could, as long as the buses are running. If we lived with that as our reality, we'd be frozen in place. We'd be paralyzed with sadness and fear. And so, this answer, this approach to the tour's dialectic is that you shouldn't feel guilty. The fact that you didn't get up this morning and say, ooh, I wonder if I'm going to die today. Don't feel guilty. Rather, embrace that. That is the Ribono Shel Olam's gift. He wants you to feel that confidence. The confidence that you'll have another day. The confidence that you'll have another year. The confidence that you will be here to see the things that you dream for your family and children. You are to embrace that and give thanks to the Almighty that He has allowed you. So what about the other side? The other side you embrace with other people. You say, you know what, I'm not going to say Hallel in Rosh Hashanah. Because this year, maybe, somebody, almost certainly somebody, is experiencing a harsh judgment. You know, in the days when I had to worry about sitting in front of a lot of people when I davened on Rosh Hashanah, now relieved of that, but when I had to sit there, people would say to me, young rabbis would say, how can you have kavod? How can you daven on Rosh Hashanah when you're up on a stage in front of hundreds of people? I would say to them, you don't understand at all. Those people are my machzor. I look around, I know the trouble in every house, in every family. I know who's waiting for medical results. And I know who's suffering severe emotional or financial crisis. I'm never up there. I'm up there looking at all the things that I have to be aware of when I daven because they're mine. They are the machzor, more so than all of the beautiful medieval poetry. And so what this approach, which is sort of related to the Yeshuas Yaakov, what this approach encourages us is everybody should look around and see their machzor. Everyone should look at everyone else and realize all these people around me are very vulnerable. And I hope that the Almighty will be kind to them. Approach number 3. Maratz Chayes, or Tzvi Hirsch Chayes, was a brilliant scholar, far in many ways beyond his time. And he, with Dr. Banyuk's help, switches lenses again and looks at this through another Gemara. This time, the Gemara is one in a famous Gemara in Shabbos. Just to review for you again, the Rambam says that the question, the reason we don't say Hallel is because the mood we're supposed to be in. The Yeshuas Yaakov looks up and says we don't say Hallel because we're facing a sad judge. Right? Because it might be somebody's bad day. I just want to keep you focused on the core question. The 2 questions. Who am I and who is he? Okay. So number 3 is another one of those who am I questions. Because the Maratz Chayes tells us there's a passage in the Gemara in Shabbos. It's very interesting. And one of the Amiroyim saying, I would like my lot to be with those who say Hallel every day. And the Gemara immediately attacks him. And they said, what are you talking about? Mar, we have a tradition that says, Hakorei Hallel b'chol yom. Anyone who says Hallel every day, harei ze mecharef u'megadef. That person is essentially a blasphemer. You're not allowed to say Hallel every day. So the Gemara answers, no. When he said, I want to be among those who say Hallel every day, he didn't mean our Hallel. He meant Psuki de Zimra. Psuki de Zimra is a very different story, because Psuki de Zimra, in essence, is a hymn to nature, to the world as it is created. So the Maratz Chayes says, you know why you can't say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Because the books of the living and the dead are open. Meaning, and why are they open particularly on Rosh Hashanah? Why is Rosh Hashanah chosen as the day of judgment? Could have been any day, right? Could have been 2 weeks from Thursday. Could have been, the first Wednesday of every 3rd month. Why is Rosh Hashanah the day? Because Rosh Hashanah is the day, Hayom Haras Olam. It is the day when man was created. It is the beginning, the dawn of human consciousness. The world into which Adam Harishon arrived, was it a world governed by miracles? Absolutely not. It was a world that didn't need miracles, because what is a miracle, as Sonia would tell me? A miracle is a deviation from the usual laws of nature. Right? God created a world to run in a certain way. Apples generally fall down. If your apples are falling up, it's time to leave off the Kiddush wine. Right? The world functions according to certain rules. When God created the world, it wasn't a world which was supposed to require miracles. It had a garden. The garden in it was created, la'ovdo l'shomra, that man was given the task of working the garden, of guarding the garden. We were custodians of the ordered world. Much later, one could say, actually, with the 10 plagues and the exodus from Egypt, God created the possibility that he might on occasion enter the world and break his own rules. We would have what would be called lemala min hateva, something above the usual rules of nature. When we go to Rosh Hashanah, when we talk about God seeing the world and judging it, when we go back to day 1 if we were to say that we cannot live in the world as God created it, we need the rules broken every day. Not only every day, but even on the first day. That the creation as God made it was flawed, because it doesn't work unless he tweaks it and band-aids and breaks its rules. That would be mecharef u'megadef. The problem with the world, the reason it needs miracles, is because we are the descendants of those. We didn't do our part. We didn't keep the rules. Had we functioned, had we chosen to be partners and follow the manufacturer's instructions, we wouldn't need miracles. And Hallel is essentially a proclamation of gratitude for the miraculous. But on Rosh Hashanah, when the books of the living and the dead are open, on Rosh Hashanah, which proclaims the possibility of din, of judgment, meaning that you can choose to behave in a way that even by the standard of justice, by the rules that were made. In other words, I'll give you an example. For many years, it doesn't work anymore, I had an incredible record of being able to talk to traffic cops when they pulled me over. Sir, roll down your window. Driver's license, insurance, please. Yes, officer. I might just mention that I'm on my way to a hospital to visit someone's dying mother. What are you, a priest? What kind of? I'm a rabbi. Dying mother, huh? All right, Rabbi, you be careful now, okay? Okay. I had an amazing method. I have another method now for dealing with this. I stopped speeding.
That might work.
I stop speeding. It's amazing. I stop at traffic lights, full stop at stop signs. I use my signal. It's magic. They don't bother me at all. Rosh Hashanah is the day which reminds us, rather than depending on the exception, rather than being told, well, we're going to let you off this time, Rabbi, drive carefully. Staying at the speed limit also works. The rules of the world, the rules of the ultimate road, if you will, can also keep you safe. And on Rosh Hashanah, if we immediately went into our speech, officer, you're not going to believe where I'm coming from. It's the wrong note. It's the wrong way to think about it. Yes.
There was no Sefer Mason originally.
Oh, originally, that's correct.
So, what's the point of giving Shevach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about the creation of the world? I mean, you can't
on the
help
day
but-
when we are reminded of its imperfection.
that there was, now we have a Sefer Mason, and then we didn't.
That's a good point. In the beginning, man was intended to be immortal. There was no DMV.
That's also almost like a comedy routine, you know, like thanks for creating the world. It's almost as good as it was when you created
Right.
it. Almost.
It's a good world. It's could be
Pretty good. Right.
still.
Rabbi, yeah, I was just going to
Yes.
say, also to include from Pirkei Avos, B'yinfol oyivcha al tismach.
Do not rejoice in the fall of your enemy.
Right. But you had said that a while
The
back, but I
sensitivity
just thought
to
that
other
was the
people's
same
burdens.
idea. Right.
Very good. Thank you, Mary. Good addition. One more. So now let's do the countdown, all right? Countdown. Number one, the Rambam. The Rambam answers the question of Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing today? Number 2, the Yeshuos Yaakov. Question, how can you sing to a sad God? Number 3, the Maratz Chayos, who says you want to sing a song about miracles. This is not the day when you're supposed to be thinking miracle. You're supposed to be thinking the world, the natural world, by the natural rules as it was created. So again, on you. And finally, last but not least, the Ravan, Rabbi Eliezer ben Natan, who was, by the way, the father-in-law of the Rav Yo. Also other famous people. He was, when you have the Rav Yo as a son-in-law, you get like really nervous inviting the kids home for Yom Tov. But the Ravan, thank God, he could handle it because he was a very, very important figure in the 11th and 12th century. The Rav Yo actually takes an interesting turn on the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, very famous Gemara, where the Mishnah says, that you all know about because it made it into the Unesana Tokef. Bottom line, as I've always told you, if you want to succeed as a psalm, as a Maimer Chazal, get someone to put some music to it. A catchy tune, and you get the Chazan to sing it, and before you know it, people know what you're talking about. So you'll know what this is. Rosh Hashanah, the Mishnah says, Kol boy olam ovrim lefanov kivanei moro. That on Rosh Hashanah, all of the creatures of the world pass before him like sheep in a flock. Shenemar, Yitzhayachad libam hamevin al kol ma'asehem, who understands all of their deeds. In other words, the capacity of God to deal with us as individuals. Now, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi, when the Gemara goes and places this in context, says this Mishnah is not following Rabbi Yossi. Why? Because Rabbi Yossi says, Odom nidon b'chol yom. Man is judged each and every day. Every day is Rosh Hashanah. You imagine the number of tzimuses that would be cooked, and we'd have a carriage shortage. Every day is a day of judgment. So the Ravan asks a very interesting question. He says to me, you know what? If we know from the Rabbi Abbo, our first name, Rabbi Abbo says you can't say Hallel on a day when God is judging. So fine, if it's only Rosh Hashanah, good, so one day wouldn't say it. What about Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi says God is judging every day. You're going to never say Hallel, according to Rabbi Yossi. For Rabbi Yossi, Hallel will never be appropriate because God will always be judging, and you wouldn't be able to say it. Says the Rambam, there is a very big difference. He says the judgment, the daily judgment of Rabbi Yossi is a purely individual thing. You know, he doesn't put the whole picture together. The judgment of Rosh Hashanah, kol boy olam, everyone who walks the earth, so to speak, there, the Ribono Shel Olam is thinking not about how is this one doing, how's that one doing, how's this one, how's that one. He's thinking about the totality, this great experiment, creation of this creature who is created in the image of God. This creature, the only creature in all the universe who has the choice about whether to play by the rules or not. Frogs don't get this question. Baboons do not get to decide. Only human beings get up in the morning and say, I don't feel like being God's faithful servant today. So that he can reward us on those mornings when we get up and say, I do. So he says, this is the day when he looks at the totality, how the whole picture is. And to tell you the truth, when he looks at the big picture, he's quite disappointed. Because the species as a whole has not worked out that well. You have idolatry, you have violence, you have immorality. There's a lot of stuff going on. And says the Ramban, therefore, on Rosh Hashanah, when God looks at how his experiment is doing, he adds together all the statistics. He finds the judge in a state of what he calls zam. Zam is rage, anger, frustration. This is very different from the God that the Yeshua's Yaakov. Yeshua's Yaakov looked up and saw a sad judge. The Ravan looks up and sees an angry judge. He's in a bad mood. Somebody took his parking spot. You don't want to be in his court today. His wife burned his toast. Boom Shalom today is coming to the share and he is upset. All he needs is for you to sing Hallel. You'll really set him off. It's very interesting what happens during that day. And what do we come to him with? What do we come to emotional with? On that day when we find him in such a sour mood, kivayoch. You know what we come to him with? We come to him with the Akeda. Come to him, the world was falling apart. And guess what happened? One man missed you. One man missed you and loved you so much that he took his son up a mountain. And guess what? That son had a son. And that son had 12 children. And those children became great tribes. And all of us who are here, it's true we're not quite as good as our grandfather. But we're here because that is who we are. We are the grandchildren and the descendants of that one man who came looking for you. That one man became a people. And do you know what's going to happen someday? This one people is going to get the message out to the entire world. Yom yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad, and the entire world. Your experiment is not a failure. Because after the statistics were at their absolute nadir, the worst, there was enough good left. Enough sense of what it was that you wanted. That a man became a family, and a family became a people, and someday a people will become a human family, one world. And they will come back to where you had hoped they would never leave. Come back to Eden. Come back to that world. But you can't begin with Hallel, because it's not over yet. The almighty Zam, his frustration, his anger, is still a reality because we, the human race, have disappointed. And so, the Ramban tells us, that's what the Gemara means. The books of the living and the dead, and as the rabbi said, what it means is we still have books of the dead. In other words, when the world started, there was no death. Human beings could be immortal because you didn't have to keep scrapping the results and starting again. Human beings were allowed to be forever in the world. And so, until that day, we hold off on the Hallel. So what then is the summary? The summary is we're asking those two questions. We ask the question, who am I and what am I supposed to be? That's one. And we have two answers. Either I am supposed to be a creature in terror, or I am supposed to be a creature who is willing to give it a try to live in God's world according to its normal rules, to live without miracles. And then the other answer is, what do we see when we look up? One, the Yeshua's Yaakov says we see God's broken heart, that we aren't a little better and that he couldn't do more for us. And the other is that we see God's angry disappointment, but a disappointment which begins to fade, a mood which begins to pass as we remind him not only who we are, but the process that we represent. A process which has the world as a place where not only evil can metastasize, but where love and virtue can be shared and can be spread and can once again become the rule by which this whole world works. Which everyone, for all of you, for each of you, for all of your dear ones. And please God, we should learn together during the year, and as we gather next Rosh Hashanah, as a very dear friend of mine would say, we should be able to record only additions and no subtractions.
Amen. Amen.